Today we are going to learn how to find the midpoint of a line segment between two numbers on the number line and the midpoint of a line segment on the XY plane. So when we look at this number line with the points 0 and 10, we know intuitively that the midpoint is 5, right? Because we think of, let's say, the point in the middle. When we look at the numbers 0 and 20, we know that the midpoint is 10. And when we look at the numbers negative 50 and 50, we know that the midpoint is 0. But what if we have numbers like 2 and 12? 5 and 34, or negative 7 and 13. To make it short, we find the midpoint by just adding the two numbers and divide them by 2. So 2 and 12 is 14, and 14 divided by 2 is 7. 5 plus 34 is 39, and 39 divided by 2 is, let's say, 40 divided by 2 is 20, so 39 divided by 2 is 19.5. What about negative 7 and 13? What is the midpoint of these two numbers? I really encourage you to pause the video and try this on your own. Negative 7 plus 13 is 6, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So the midpoint between the points negative 7 and 13 is 3. We added the numbers x1 and x2 in general, and then we divided them by 2. So the midpoint is x1 plus x2 divided by 2. In other words, the midpoint between two numbers, x1 and x2, on the number line is the average, x1 plus x2 divided by 2. But how can we find the midpoint of 2 points on the xy plane? Let's say we have the points A to 1 and B 8, 1. To find the midpoint of these two numbers is simple. We just handle this like we did it with numbers on the number line. We add up the x-coordinates, which are 2 and 8, which is 10, and then divide the 10 by 2, which is then 5. So the midpoint of the points A and B is 5, 1. Don't forget the y-coordinate 1. What if we have the points C, 3, 2, and D, 3, 6? What is the midpoint of this line segment? Similar to the previous example, we add up the y-coordinates and divide them by 2. So 2 plus 6 is 8, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So the midpoint is 3, 4. Don't forget the x-coordinate 3. Now it's getting interesting. How can we find the midpoint of point E, 5, 2, and F, 9, 5? To find the midpoint of these 2 points is also very simple. We just have to find the midpoint of the x-coordinates and the midpoint of the y-coordinates. The midpoint of the x-coordinates is the same as we did in the previous examples and in the examples on the number line. We just add up the two x coordinates, which are 5 and 9, which is 14, and then divide that by 2, which is then 7. So the x-coordinate of the midpoint is 7. What about the y-coordinate of the midpoint? I really encourage you to pause the video and try this on your own. Instead of adding the x-coordinates, we now add up the y-coordinates, which are 2 and 5, which gives us then 7. And then we divide 7 by 2, like we did with the x-coordinates. So we get 3.5 for the y-coordinate of the midpoint. So the midpoint of the points E and F is 7, 3.5. Let's write down what we did and call it the midpoint formula. M equals x1 plus x2 divided by 2 and y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Again, we added up the x-coordinates of the 2 points and divided them by 2 to get the x-coordinate of the midpoint. And we did the same for the y-coordinate of the midpoint, respectively. If you have any questions or if you need more exercises about this topic, let me know in the comments, so I can make an extra video about it. This video is what I did for you. If you want to do something for me, hit the bell button, like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching and happy learning, everyone.